On this inaugural episode of the Trauma Lama Podcast, I'll tell you about who I am, what I do, why I'm even here, and what you can expect from the podcast. We'll talk about what trauma really is. We'll hear from a community member about what their trauma story and journey to recovery has been like. And we'll bust the myth on whether some trauma is better than others. I'm Stephanie. This is the third time we're trying to record this first episode, so let's pray to God this finally works. Let's get into it. Hey there, welcome. Thanks for checking out the Trauma Lama Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, and I'm so glad that you found us and you want to give us a try. I'm a registered nurse psychotherapist with a passion for helping people understand and live with the complexities of trauma. And, spoiler alert, you can thrive despite your trauma. You might be wondering, what exactly does a registered nurse psychotherapist do? Well, I think of it this way. I'm a registered nurse. I bring a holistic understanding of health, so mind, body, and spirit, to my practice. I also practice psychotherapy. I'm trained in various therapeutic modalities to help you process experiences, develop coping strategies, and ultimately find your path to healing and growth. I've worked with countless individuals and families here in Ottawa, Ontario, and beyond who have faced the profound challenges that trauma brings. And I've seen firsthand the incredible resilience of the human spirit. So why the podcast? Why now? Well, because trauma in every form is pervasive. It touches so many lives, yet it's often misunderstood, stigmatized, and isolating. My own journey, both personal and professional, has shown me the urgent need for a space where we can openly discuss trauma, debunk myths, bring about more awareness, and share stories of hope and recovery. I believe that knowledge is power. And by understanding how trauma impacts us, we can begin to reclaim our narrative and build lives of meaning and purpose. Sounds pretty good, right? I think so. And why not try to do that all together as one community? This podcast is for you if you've experienced trauma, if you love someone who has experienced trauma, or if you simply want to learn more about the human experience. Each episode is going to be divided into 3 different segments designed to empower and inform you. In the first part of the show, we'll dive deep into education on trauma. We'll explore what trauma is, how it affects our brains and bodies, and most importantly, practical ways to make the effects of trauma work for you. We'll talk about post-traumatic growth, resilience, and actionable strategies you can integrate into your daily life. Finally, we're putting together an owner's manual for your trauma. The second part of the show is incredibly important to me. We'll be talking with members of our community who are living with the effects of trauma. These brave individuals will share their unique stories, their challenges, and their triumphs. Their voices will remind us that we're not alone, and that healing is not only possible, but happening all around us. And we'll get to collect all of these stories on the trauma tapes. And finally, in the last part of the show, we'll be busting myths and breaking down stigma. We're going to call out all of the BS. We'll talk common misconceptions about trauma, mental health, and therapy. And we're going to create space for more open dialogue and understanding. My goal is to normalize these conversations and to chip away at the shame that too often accompanies trauma. My hope is that this isn't just a podcast, that it becomes a community, a place for connection, learning, and growth. Together, we'll explore the landscape of trauma, not just to understand its depths, but to discover the peaks of resilience and triumph that lay beyond that. So let's all take a deep grounding breath, settle in, and embark on this healing journey together. First up, let's crack open that owner's manual. In our first installment of the owner's manual, we're going to dive into the heart of what we're truly here to talk about, understanding trauma. We're going to break it down as to exactly what it is, how it affects us, and how we begin to navigate its impact. So let's start from the very basics. What the hell is trauma? At its core, trauma refers to the lasting effects on the body, mind, and spirit after someone experiences an event or series of events that overwhelms their emotional response. It's not just the event itself, but how our system reacts to it when our usual coping mechanisms simply aren't enough. When a traumatic event occurs, our innate survival system kicks in. This is often referred to as the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. These are automatic, evolutionary responses designed to protect us from the threat that we're perceiving in front of us, whether it's real or not. We've all heard of fight, right? This is that response that prepares us to actually fight off the threat. It can manifest as feeling aggressive, wanting to physically confront the perceived danger, or show up as an explosive release of emotions. It's our body getting ourselves ready to fight off and scare away the danger that's in front of us by making us look bigger, sound bigger, feel bigger, scarier, and more threatening. I'm sure we've also heard of the flight response. This response readies us to actually run away from the threat. You might feel intense urges to want to escape, have a sense of hypervigilance, or feel fidgety and restless. That's really your body getting itself ready to say that at any moment when it needs to just get up and get the heck out of Dodge, to get away from the threat. We've been hearing a lot more too recently about the freeze response. This response is literally about freezing in place to make that threat think you're already dead. This can feel like a consistent or constant sense of dread, being stuck or unable to move, pounding heartbeat, and maybe even pale skin. Often people describe themselves as feeling trapped, or some might say they look like deer in the headlights. And again, that's literally our body trying to look as dead as possible so that the threat will just walk away and not even want to try bothering with us. More recently, we've found that there's even a fourth response that can kick into our survival instinct, and that's called the fawn response. So this response involves trying to appease the threat to avoid conflict. This tends to look like excessive agreement, people-pleasing, or being overly concerned with making everybody happy. I don't know about you guys, but this one seems kind of familiar to me from time to time. It's a strategy to de-escalate danger by becoming non-threatening. And it's pretty easy to spot a people pleaser. So I think a lot of us probably have had moments where we feel this way and didn't even know that this is actually a response to trying to survive. So knowing all this, now you might be saying, okay, well, how does it actually look in daily life for someone living with this trauma? Let's break it down a little bit further. If you're stuck in fight mode, in everyday life, you could be someone who's often in defense mode, ready for an argument, clenching your jaw, grinding your teeth, or feeling a burning sensation in your stomach. You might even be more aggressive or quick to anger. Because again, you're prepared to fight off whatever threat is coming at you. If you're stuck in flight, you could be really hypervigilant, feel fidgety all the time, or a sense of being trapped or restless, or even having difficulty remembering events as a way of escaping from reality. Our brains will literally take our consciousness and disconnect it from what's happening in order to help save our sanity from being too overwhelmed and possibly making us a target and putting our lives in danger. If you're stuck in freeze, you might feel a constant sense of dread, have pale skin, feel stiff or heavy, might be feeling unable to move or feel like you can't make decisions, or you might experience a pounding heartbeat. If someone tells you that you look like a deer in the headlights, probably means you're stuck in freeze mode at the moment. If you're stuck in the fawn response, you're going to be really concerned with making everybody else around you happy. You might be prone to excessive agreement, people-pleasing behaviors. You're going to do anything to avoid any potential conflict or negative attention. And that's not cool, because that could be putting you into situations where you're actually doing things that go against your own morals, ethics, beliefs, or they could go against those of society and the law. So being stuck in fawn can still be really dangerous for us too. It's crucial to understand, though, that these responses are not choices. They're deeply ingrained survival mechanisms, because if you look at these as a choice that you're making in your behavior, it makes you feel like you're doing something wrong. But really, what's happening is your body is reliving the trauma that your response system appears to be stuck in. I like to call it having a body memory. And you can't choose whether or not to experience a memory. These things happen. They're second nature. Okay, so given all of this, how does this trauma response thing actually have an effect on us? Well, it's not just about those memories or emotions in our mind. Trauma has far-reaching impacts on every aspect of our being. When your body is experiencing trauma, our physiological system goes into overdrive. And if you get stuck in that, that leads to chronic physiological activation, meaning that your stress response system is constantly on alert. And over time, this chronic activation can contribute to increased body deterioration, impacting everything from our immune system to our cardiovascular health. We might experience chronic pain, digestive issues, or constant fatigue, all linked to the body's sustained state of alert, especially if your health team is having a hard time figuring out where these health issues are coming from. We know that trauma has an effect on the mind, but I don't think it's always explored as to how profoundly it can affect our mind. Our brain gets wired for survival, and traumatic experiences alter its structure and function. This can create a state of chronic psychological activation, where anxiety, hypervigilance, and intrusive thoughts can become a common everyday occurrence. This environment can be an ideal circumstance for the development of mental health disorders like anxiety disorders, depression, PTSD, and even dissociative disorders. Our ability to focus, regulate emotions, and form healthy attachments can all be impacted around our brain's rewiring because of trauma. Probably one of the most long-standing and significantly debilitating aspects of how trauma can affect us is how trauma actually affects our spirit. I'm not necessarily talking about religion here, but I'm talking about our deep sense of self and connection. Whether you call that your identity, your soul, your spirit, it's all the same thing, right? Trauma can dramatically alter how we view ourselves and our identity. It can shatter our sense of safety, trust, and self-worth. It also impacts how we would relate to other people, making it difficult to form those close bonds or feel safe in relationships. And fundamentally, trauma can shake our values and our beliefs about the world, justice, and even humanity itself. Understanding these impacts is a really good first step towards healing. It helps us realize that many of our reactions aren't weaknesses, but rather intelligent, albeit sometimes maladaptive, survival strategies that helped us get through the trauma that we lived through. These responses and reactions to how we go about our day-to-day life is how we made it to where we are today. And I wouldn't lay blame on anybody who showed up in an interaction with me and acted and reacted in some of these ways, because I know they're not choosing to be like this. This is what's happened to them as a result of their lived experience. We'll dive back into the owner's manual on the next episode. But in the meantime, if you liked what I talked about today, or if I didn't cover something that you were hoping I would, leave me a comment below and I'll do my best to answer your questions. Let's go over to our tape deck and throw in today's trauma tape. I have the immense privilege of hearing a first-hand account of navigating trauma, and I'm so honored that our first guest was willing to come on the show and share with us today. Here's the interview that I did with Laura. So for the very first lived experience interview segment that we've got for the podcast. I'm lucky enough to be joined by a lovely lady by the name of Laura, who has agreed to come on and talk to us about her lived experience with trauma, and hopefully share a little bit about what she's gone through, what's worked for her, what hasn't worked for her, and hopefully to really bring you guys a sense of, oh, I'm not the only one. There is something that I can do about this, even though I didn't think there ever would be one. So, Laura, I want to thank you very much for agreeing to be on the show. Super excited for us to get started. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great, and I just wanted to say thank you for inviting me to be on the show. I love talking about mental health, helping to break the stigma. It's one of my passions, so thank you.
Amazing. So do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are outside of this experience?
So first and foremost, my most proud thing that I am is a mother. I'm also a trauma-informed life coach and an author of a book that I published last year. I help my clients get through the traumas that they've experienced and give them some tools and resources.
I've found anyway in my time in mental health, it's the ones who've lived it who end up being the best guides for others to help get through it, to help others find that too. So that's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. What motivated you to want to share your story on this podcast? What was it that motivated you to want to go, no, let me talk about my story instead of the voiceover work I was asking about?
You're going to laugh, but the fact that it was called Trauma Lama, I thought that was hilarious, but also very poignant and very relatable. One of the working titles for my book was actually trauma. So trauma in and of itself is not a fun thing to talk about, but the fact that you made it fun, the Trauma Lama, and kind of catchy rhyming title, I was like, yeah, I got to be on that podcast. So that was it, honestly. And obviously because I want to help to break the stigma surrounding mental health and talk about it openly, like, you know.
Let's not be ashamed to talk about it. Let's not be too serious to talk about it, right? Exactly. Because it's when we give anything that feeling of it's just a cool thing to talk about, it's not this big mysterious thing, or it's not this taboo thing we should talk about, you kind of take that power away from that thing, right?
Exactly.
From being able to actually take back the control. Yeah, amazing.
Exactly.
So then, could you describe in your own words the experience that led you to your trauma? So what was that like for you?
Yeah, so when I was thinking about what to talk about specifically, unfortunate, I've been through several traumas, but I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me because I've used those experiences to motivate me to learn and grow and to help other people. So the one that I'm going to focus on today is the verbal and emotional abuse that I suffered from my stepfather growing up. We were with him when I was 7 up until the age of 19. And he was just a miserable person. And obviously he had unhealed traumas of his own, and he took it out on all of us. So it was a nightmare, honestly. He would do things like call me names, tell me that I was stupid for getting one bad grade on my report card. He would ground me, which that's not really a thing anymore, I don't think, but he would not let me, talk to my friends or go out for something as simple as forgetting to turn out the lights. So it was just really, really, I didn't know it was abuse at the time, but it was really unfair behavior and really beyond strict. It was just, I felt like I was living in a nightmare because I would listen to my friends talk about their parents and their, upbringing, and I'm like, I don't get to do any of those things, and I get yelled at. And another thing that I remember that stuck out in my mind, and I talk about it in my book, one summer I was 15 years old, I think, or maybe I was 17 and my brother was 15, and my stepdad made us level the backyard because it had, holes and it was uneven. We had no idea what we were doing. We were kids. And he would just stand on the back stairs and bark orders at us and tell us we were doing it all wrong. But never once did he lift up a shovel to help us or come and show us how to do it. He would just yell at us. And at one point I did consider calling Children's Aid to see if they could step in, but I was afraid to do that because I didn't want my mom to have to suffer. Like, they might have taken us away from her too. So I decided to just stay silent and pretend like everything was okay instead, but it was not okay.
No. And, you brought up a lot of different feelings you have in those instances, the fear of what could happen if you did try to step up. Was there anything else was really poignant that you remember feeling in those moments where your stepdad that really stick with you? Are there any other emotions you can think of?
Yeah, I remember feeling really hopeless and helpless, especially as I got older. I remember feeling at the age of 12, I felt just so hopeless, and I actually made a pact with my best friend that it was a suicide pact, that we had a plan, and she was miserable at home as well. And I can't believe it now that I actually had a suicide pact with my friend at the age of 12, but I just felt that hopeless and that stuck, that I couldn't get free from this situation. And I actually threatened suicide at school when I was 13, and thank God somebody was there to stop me. The social worker from the school was there, and he pulled me aside and took the time to find out what was going on and why I was feeling this way. That really, really, really helped me to change the way that I looked at the situation when the social worker stepped in, because he made me realize that there is another way, and there is hope.
I really appreciate that you shared about this experience of having that suicide pact with your friend. I've actually heard it described that for some, having a suicide plan is actually what helps them cope with trauma, because it's a backup plan.
It is,
right?
yeah.
To get out. If all else fails and there is no other way you can protect yourself or keep yourself safe, get the things that you need, you have a backup plan. So I can see how that might have been a comforting thing for you and your friend at that age. And so for me, when I learned that, it totally changed the way that I look at suicidal ideation, especially in people who've had trauma, and what that can really mean for somebody. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. So given the way that you were treated by your stepfather, or how did you find that this initially impacted your life, in the way that you tried to handle things and the way that you then progressed into adulthood?
Yeah, it had a massive impact on how I lived my life for the longest time. So what I ended up doing was I became a perfectionist. I thought that if I was good enough and that if I behaved perfectly and I was a straight A student and I was a perfect daughter, that he wouldn't yell at me anymore, and we could have a good relationship as a father figure. He told me later on in life, when I was old enough to understand, that he yelled at me more because he knew I could do better. And to me, that's so backwards and so wrong. But in his mind, he took out a lot of his anger and whatever feelings he had on me more than my siblings, because I had the most potential. And I was so shocked when I learned that, oh man, I should have just given up then.
How interesting then that all you wanted to be was good enough.
Yep.
But for your stepfather, it's was there a good enough? Was there ever a good enough?
No.
No.
There was always something wrong with like I mentioned before, I had, A's and B's on my report card, but if there was one C, he would point out that one C. And so, yeah, I don't think there would have ever been good enough.
So when you came to the age where you could move out, get away from all of this, what was that experience like for you?
It was difficult, but also really freeing. So my mom actually finally decided to leave when I was 18, turning 19. Yeah, so we left finally, and at first it felt so amazing and freeing because my mom was the good parent, if so to speak, and the one that was rational, and I was allowed to date and bring my boyfriend over. So it was just really freeing. I didn't really mention before, but we also grew up in a religious household. So on top of the abuse and the strictness, there was the religious aspect where, dating wasn't allowed and going to certain places wasn't allowed. Even having friends outside of the church wasn't allowed. So it was very smothering and suffocating at home. So when we did leave, it was great. However, it was challenging for me because I had never been allowed to make my own choices up until that point. So my stepdad always had told us what to do, how to do it, when to do it. We weren't allowed to make mistakes for ourselves and learn from them. So, but yeah, so I was a mess, needless to say. Like, I had low self-esteem. I didn't know how to make decisions for myself. I felt very, even though I'm not an introvert, I felt like an introvert because I was scared to even speak my mind to people for fear of how they would react. So it took a while, but that's how it felt at first, for sure.
And so at what point did you start to realize that you did need some support, or that you needed to make a change in your life and move toward and pivot towards that path of healing and recovery?
Yeah, so unfortunately, 6 months after we left my stepfather and started our new life, my mom passed away in a car accident. And in that moment, when my mom was on life support and we had to make the tough decision to let her go, I promised her that we would be okay and that I would do my best to make her proud and that kind of thing. So that's the turning point. That was the turning point for me. And I decided shortly after that I would go back to school and focus on what I was passionate about. At the time, it was social work, and then I moved into psychology. I decided to travel for a little bit, kind of experience life more, so that I would have some lived experience, like what your podcast talks about. And then I also decided that I would get a really good job so that I could support myself. So yeah, so that was the turning point for me, and that was also when I started to go to therapy.
Can you think of some key turning points or moments that helped you along that healing journey?
The biggest one for me, and a lot of people are going to find this hard to accept maybe, is when I forgave my stepdad. He was already passed away. He died 6 months after my mom. I really had to sit and think about the effects that the impact that he had on my life. Forgiveness is not for them, it's for you.
It's for you. Absolutely.
Yeah. And when I realized that, because the Bible, which I grew up with, teaches you kind of the opposite, and I was like, that doesn't resonate with me, but this did, that forgiveness is for me. And if I can let this go, then I can finally move forward with my life. It took time and a lot of angry feelings that I allowed myself to feel, and some journaling. But I was finally able to let it go by picturing my stepdad as a little boy. What must he have had to endure to become such a mean, angry person? Picturing him like a little boy, it's hard to stay angry at a kid, right? So that really helped me to be able to forgive him and let everything go that had happened. That was a huge turning point for me.
What resources, people, or practices did you find to be most helpful for you in processing and moving forward?
In terms of resources, I learned a lot actually during my university experience because I took psychology. So learning about the different types of therapies and learning about the different types of disorders that people can have, because I could understand better why people do the things they do, and it helped me understand why I did the things I did too. In one book that I found really, really helpful, it was called Codependent No More by Melody Beattie. Typically, it's for people that have lived with an alcoholic or their spouse is an alcoholic, but it can also be for anyone that lives in a household where somebody is narcissistic, really manipulative or controlling. So it talks about codependent behavior and how to break free from that. I really saw myself in that book.
You mentioned something, about therapy and how you had multiple therapists.
Yes.
And
yes.
So did you find you went through that struggle with therapy where at what point are we saying like, oh, fuck therapy, like this is ridiculous, I can't, they don't get me, they don't understand that, like, did you ever have that? Did you get that moment too?
Yeah. So my first therapist, my dad was trying to be really helpful because it was right after my mom passed away, and he knew of a therapist that was a family friend, and so he offered to see my brother and I. But he was an older gentleman that reminded me of my stepfather. So I was like, I'm sorry, this is not working out. And I apologized to my dad too. I went a few times just to appease my dad because I felt bad, but there was no way that I could continue that therapy relationship. But then, you keep trying because I knew that I needed help, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to succeed in life or to work through my issues unless I had some guidance. So
Absolutely.
Eventually I did find the right fit, and she really helped me to come to terms with everything. And she encouraged me to go on my trip to Australia that I took for a year by myself.
Amazing. So in all of this, what have you learned about yourself?
So much. I wrote a whole book about it, but
yes.
I can try to focus in on the main points. I learned that I'm not my past, and I get to decide my future. It doesn't control me anymore. I have the power to make things better. A lot of people get stuck in this mindset that they're the victim and all these bad things happened to me, which is true. I couldn't control the situation, but you don't need to stay stuck. So I decided, it's crazy, but even when I was 11 years old, I don't want to be like the rest of my family. You are the author of the new chapter or the new book that happens after your abuse, and that's what I did. So I learned that the hard way, and I'm hoping that not everyone has to do that.
Yep. I have my saying, victims, if you stay in that victim mindset, you stall and you fall. Survivors, they rise and they thrive.
They do.
Yep. So it's a matter of stepping out of that victim mindset and realizing, I still have, the ability to do some stuff in this. Like I can still take control back. What would you say the words healing and or recovery mean to you?
To me, healing really means that I no longer subscribe to the messages that I had ingrained in me in childhood. So I questioned everything, and that was really healing for me because I was able to love and accept me for who I am instead of who what my upbringing told me that I should be. I always wanted to fit in, but I knew that I was different in a lot of ways. That doesn't mean that it's bad or wrong. It just means that I'm different, and I should love and accept myself for who I am. We're never perfect, and maybe we're not supposed to strive for perfection, but we should try to be better than we were yesterday.
So I know you talked about your message that you had for listeners. Do you have any advice that you would offer to a listener who might be going through a similar experience?
One thing I can't stress enough is that you are not alone. There are other people out there that are going through the same thing as you or something similar, and don't try to do it alone. But you can't do it alone. It's people are here for connection and community. We're here to help each other. If you reach out, you'd be surprised who the universe brings into your life to help you through the hard times. So please, please, please talk to someone if you're going through a hard time.
If any of our listeners are curious about the rest of your story, what is the name of and where could they find your book?
My book is called Never Again, and you can find it on Amazon.ca and Amazon.com.
Again, we'll put a link down in the show notes so that if anybody is interested, they are just one click away. That's fantastic. Is there anything else that you feel like you want to share with the audience before we wrap up today?
Mostly just don't let your trauma keep you down. It's easy to do. Depression is real. Anxiety is real. Mental health issues are real. But there's so much help out there and people that are willing to help. People like Stephanie as a mental health nurse, myself as a life coach and empath. We create safe spaces for people to come and talk because we don't want you to go through this alone. We will sit there with you through the darkness and hold your hand, and you would be amazed at how much having one person just sit there and listen to you can do. And so that's what I want to leave you with today.
Laura, I want to thank you again so much for sharing your story with us today. Your honesty and vulnerability are truly a gift. It's so important for people to hear these stories, to know they're not alone in their struggles, and to see that healing is possible. For our listeners who are moved by Laura's journey and want to learn more, you can check out her personal website and find links where you can also purchase her book in our description below. We're down to our third act of the episode, and today we're going to be tackling a major myth about trauma. So let's call out this BS. You may have heard people say, not all trauma is created equal. On the surface, this might sound true. After all, a car accident and the loss of a loved one are very different experiences. But the statement often comes with an unspoken and damaging subtext that suggests that some trauma is more significant or worse than others. I am calling BS on this right now. The truth is, everyone's trauma is valid. The experience of trauma is not a competition. You can't compare one person's suffering to another's and declare a winner of who has it worse. Trauma is pain, and pain is inherently subjective. What's overwhelmingly traumatic for one person might be difficult but manageable for somebody else. It's not about the event itself, but about how your individual nervous system and emotional state respond to it. In my 16 plus years career as a nurse, I've seen some things that at first blush would be totally traumatizing to see. And don't get me wrong. On some level, some of the things I see definitely do still leave their mark and traumatize me in a way. But because of the work I do, I've worked really hard to learn how to stay mindful and focused in the face of something that could be traumatic so that I can keep the context of what I'm seeing around the response my body is having. So traumatic events don't tend to hit me quite as hard as it could for somebody who hasn't been in my, working role or who, has the experiences that I've had. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that any of the events that I could see in a day that could come across as traumatizing, that I would say, oh no, they're not actually that bad. They're not that traumatizing. Everybody's experience is different. Everybody's experience is valid. So anybody who is claiming trauma around something that they've lived needs to be listened to and taken seriously. No one can tell you that your trauma is insignificant enough to have life-altering effects. Whether you've experienced a single shocking event or a prolonged period of stress, your feelings and reactions are real and valid. dismissing your own pain or someone else's by saying, it's not that bad, or, other people have it worse. It's incredibly harmful. It minimizes the struggle and can prevent people from actually seeking the help they need. The myth that not all trauma is created equal creates a dangerous competition. It forces people to rank their suffering and decide if their screwy side effects are deserving of attention. This is a false and damaging narrative. Healing is a journey that everybody deserves to embark on, regardless of the perceived severity of their trauma. Remember, the goal of this podcast is to break down the stigma and normalize these conversations. Your pain is real. Your journey is valid. And you are not alone. Well, that's all I've got for my first episode. I'm so glad we actually made it through. Thank you so much for those who stuck around to the very end. I've really enjoyed putting together this episode. I can't wait to put together more. I hope that you guys like it enough that you'll come back and see more episodes. If you did, I'd love a like, a comment, and maybe even a subscribe down in the links or buttons on whatever platform that you're taking this podcast in with. Because again, I want to see this podcast turn into something more than just something for someone to listen to. I'd love for this to really become a community where we can support each other, bring about more awareness about trauma, and hold each other up in our journeys of healing. So, till next time, take care of yourselves. I'll see you in about a week. Bye.